why I wanted Rik on the call. So I'll stop yapping now. You guys can go ahead. Go ahead.
Right. So, I mean, I take it that the libertarian is trying to say something like the agent has a choice to do either A or B. He has reasons to do A, and he has reasons to do B. And let's imagine that the reasons are of equal strength, right? And so it seems to me that the problem with the libertarian view is that they're saying nothing whatsoever explains why he does A rather than B, right? It's just a purely random event. And I just don't see how you could derive these other sort of properties, I guess we could call them, that are usually built into the notion of free will, or that free will is supposed to undergird things like strong desert or some robust account of moral responsibility. I don't really see why any of that would turn on whether there was a random event that ended up, explaining why you did A rather than B. I mean, it's funny to say explain, because it seems to me it's basically to say there is no explanation. It's just a brutally contingent event. You end up doing A, at least in this world. In some possible worlds, you end up doing B. Maybe it'll be 50-50 across the space of possible worlds. So there's just no explanation.
Right. So what is your worry with that?
I just don't see how you get any notion of desert or responsibility out of that.
I see. Yeah. Well, right. So I'm a libertarian myself. So I believe that if determinism occurs, we don't have free will. But I do believe that we do have free will. I'm inclined to think so. And I think that we have free will only if we have alternative options available to us. And I would also be inclined, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm inclined to think that we have a free choice with regard to some state of affairs, only if we don't have overwhelming reason to actualize that state of affairs, or not to actualize that state of affairs. So if I do some actions, we'll explain why doing the action is. So I take free will to be a mystery, pretty much like Peter van Inwagen does.
Like who? Sorry?
Like Peter van Inwagen does.
Oh yes, okay.
So I take it that the only sensible explanation there is that I did it. So it was me who did it. And that is a contingent fact. Indeed, I could have failed to do it. That doesn't make it a random act. I don't think it's the right description of it. It's contingent, but it's not random. Because I did it, whereas other events are random indeed. Such as maybe the movement that lectures, I don't know, on Copenhagen.
I'm sorry, Rik. Jack, could you maybe mute your mic?
Oh, I forgot to mute.
Yeah.
That's much better. So I don't take that to be random, in the sense that maybe the location of electrons is random on the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. So how can I be? So your worry with how we can still maintain is the question how we can still be responsible for our actions. So I don't see the worry if it's me who's the author of my actions and omissions. I don't see the worry with responsibility there.
Well, there's a number of issues.
Okay.
So in the first place, you're saying that it's you. I'm not necessarily contesting that it's you who performed the action or made the choice. That seems to me a purely terminological question. There isn't really anything substantive to dispute there.
Okay.
right? The point is that in the other possible worlds where you choose B, you chose to do B, right? You happen to choose to do A here, right? My point is that nothing explains why you did A in this possible world versus doing B in the other possible world, right? Now, you said you wanted to resist understanding that as random, right? But I'm not actually seeing how there's any importantly relevant distinction between that state of affairs, right, and the one that we normally understand to be random, assuming that there is irreducible randomness as there is in some interpretations of quantum mechanics, for example, right? So to take as an example of the uranium, let's imagine a lump of uranium, right? And a lump of uranium is radioactive, and so therefore it has a disposition to emit an alpha particle. 50% of the time or something like that. So at any moment, time t1, right, either the lump of uranium will emit an alpha particle or it won't, right? And what I understand to be the claim, if we want to say that it's irreducibly random, is that nothing actually explains why in this possible world, if it emits an alpha particle, in the other possible world where the conditions are exactly identical up to the moment time t1, right, it doesn't emit the alpha particle, right? That's what I understand to be the claim that it's actually random, right? Because if we could appeal to deterministic laws to explain why it did it, then it would do it in all the possible worlds. And even if there was some kind of statistical breakdown, right, where we said instead of 50-50 it was 60-40, nonetheless, all that would do is explain why it was more likely that the event would take place, but it wouldn't actually explain why it happened to take place this time rather than that time, right? So I don't see any relevant distinction there in the case of the freely willed action, right, that the libertarian is appealing to. The agent has a choice between A and B at time t1, and in half the possible worlds he chooses A, and half the other possible worlds he chooses B, even though antecedent conditions are absolutely identical. Now, there is a difference there, which is that the agent is actually acting on the basis of reasons, right? But I don't see how that's a relevant difference, because the point is the reasons don't actually explain why he does A rather than B. They merely explain why he does either A or B. Right,
because they can explain both worlds, the reasons. I take it to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So it just seems to me that in every relevant respect, it's exactly what we mean by the term random.
Well, so when
I would contest the claim. I would contest the claim that it's not actually random. That libertarianism is not actually the view that human free action is random eventuation.
Well, so in this one possible world, I bring about an action A, I perform that action, and in the other world I bring about or perform another action. So what explains it? I mean, I'm not sure you can talk of explanation here, but to the extent that you can, it's that I choose to do the one thing in the one world and I choose to do the other thing in the other world.
Well, that's entirely an ex post characterization. You're just sort of saying, well, if I do A, then that means that I chose to do A, and if I do B, then I chose to do B. Fine, I can grant you that, right?
No,
but you're just saying by chose that I ended up doing A rather than B.
I didn't say that if I do A, then I do A of my free will. I mean, we can easily imagine that I'm somehow forced to do A.
Well, then I just say that it was your reasons, right? It was your reasons to do either A or B that explained why you did either A or B. But it doesn't explain why you did A.
Right. So I'm not saying my reasons explain that I'm doing.
Right. Well, nothing explains it, right? I mean, what else could explain it? It doesn't have an explanation. It's a purely inexplicable, unexplained, completely contingent event.
Well, either that, or the fact that explains that I'm doing this thing is that I choose. I mean, I choose to do that.
Hey, that's just appealing to a normative principle. You're just saying that the two actions differ in virtue of the fact that they differ, right? That to me is not a substantive claim at all, right? You're just giving a label to the fact that the two actions are different and saying by that label you're calling choice, right?
Right.
It's just saying, well, when I do A, I choose it. When I do B, I choose it, right? But in fact, when I do A, it's a purely random event, and I'm going to call that a choice. When I do B, it's a purely random event, and I'm going to call that my choice, right? So I don't see that you're getting anything interesting out of the idea of choice there, you know.
What you're just saying right now, Jack, reminds me a little bit of Raynion's gumball machine thing that he was running, right?
Yes, right, gumball machine example. So the gumball machine example is something like this. There's a gumball machine that releases a gumball, and the gumball travels down a chute, and the chute leads to a fork where there are two different chutes, and the gumball can either go out chute A or it can go out chute B, right? And let's assume that there's some kind of randomizer that is involved in its going down chute A rather than chute B. But, you know, the randomizer could make it go down B rather than A, and so we can imagine some kind of quantum phenomenon built into the randomizer like a uranium atom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, why did it go down? Why did it go down chute A, right? And I think the idea of something like, you can't say, well, if it didn't go down chute A, we wouldn't have the gumball out of chute A, right? If it had gone down B, it wouldn't have come through the A chute, right? But that isn't to actually explain why it goes down A, right? It's just to say that if it hadn't gone down A, we wouldn't be able to see it at A, right? We would have had to go to B to find it on A, right?
But there's no agent there who's causing anything, right? Or is it not relevant?
Say that again? Oh, there's no agent. No, but the point is that if you change the randomizer to an agent, you end up with the same problem. Because if I say, well, why did the agent choose A rather than B, right? All you can do is say that the agent had reasons to do A and had reasons to do B, but there's no explanation whatsoever for why it was A that he did rather than B. Right, he just happened to do it.
Right, but can't we just say that the person, the agent, is the cause, and the reasons are the explanation, right? And then rest the case there. And if not, why not?
Well, the gumball is the cause, right?
Right. Okay, go ahead, Rik.
Yeah, so I'm a bit worried. I'm a bit worried for. A bit worried about the kind of question you're asking. So, we're to imagine that someone performs an action A, and you're asking, why does this person perform A rather than B? And I say, well, because that person chooses to perform A rather than B. And then you ask, well, but what is the explanation of his choosing A rather than choosing B? And I mean, if you want, I mean, you can go on asking endlessly for further explanation, but of course I can't give those. I mean, at a certain point, it's just a primitive fact that someone chooses of his own free will, her own free will, to perform an action rather than some other action, and there is no further explanation of that.
That's exactly what I understand randomness to be. right? It's the point at which you say there is no further reason why the uranium atom did A rather than B, right? Emitted an alpha particle rather than not emit an alpha particle, right? There is no further reason why the agent did A rather than B.
Can I just add one small thing regarding that?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Yaniv. If there is no further reason, and it's a mere kind of like first cause, right? Whether we call it random or not, it certainly doesn't feel like the type of thing that we could say is David's, or kind of came from David and is represents who David is. If it's of the nature that it's a first cause, right? Nothing about your personality would have caused it then. So I don't think that would satisfy.
Well, the thing, your personality explains why you have reasons to do A and why you have reasons to do B. But nothing explains why your reasons for doing A won out over your reasons for doing B, right? Nothing about your personality explains that. Nothing explains it. It's a completely inexplicable event, right? And that's just like the uranium case. Right? That's essentially
unsatisfying, right? To say, well, there's nothing that explains why I did A, I just did it.
Right, well, I think one of the reasons why it's unsatisfying, at least to me, is because I think that the proponent of libertarian free will wants to say that the agent acts on the basis of reasons, right? And that when an agent performs a free act, he's performing that act and you may have reasons to do A rather than B and reasons to do B rather than A. But if all those things are equal, right, to one another, then none of those reasons actually explain the action, right? So it seems to me what we want is a view of free will where our reasons actually explain why we do what we do, not why we have, two different. When faced with those two choices, there's nothing that explains why we do it, right? Because let's imagine that A is a very good action and B is an evil action, right? And so I have reasons to do A, at least by my lights, and I have reasons to do B, at least by my lights, right? Now, it seems to me the libertarian wants to invest that with a lot of, he wants to make that a very highly morally charged thing, right? Whether I decide to do B, decide to do A, right? But my reasons don't explain why I do A in this possible world, right? They only explain why I do either A or B. Nothing explains why I do A rather than B. So in fact, my doing A isn't explained by my reasons. It's only partly explained by my reasons, right? It's explained, my reasons explain why I do either A or B. But why I do A rather than B, right, has no explanation whatsoever on the libertarian view.
Before Rik Peels has to go, I'd like to have some feedback from him on this. Where do you think you guys are at this point colliding? Because I can, if he wants to, send him some audio on where you are explaining all in this in full extent. But where do you think you guys are colliding now, so I can get feedback from Rik?
I feel our colliding is that I'm asked for the further explanation where none is to be given, and if you because I don't think there's anything. So it's not the reasons that explain my actions; it's my choice, and there's no further explanation of my choice. And so you're suggesting that makes it random, and I don't see any reason to accept that claim. Because
what's the relevant distinction?
What is the relevant distinction?
What's the relevant distinction between what you're calling a choice and a random event?
But that it is a choice. So that is.
No, that's just appealing to a normative principle, right? I'm asking you, given that you're calling this a choice and you're calling the other thing a non-choice, I'm asking you, what property relevantly distinguishes a choice from a non-choice?
But I mean, you've read the philosophical literature. You know how notoriously hard it is. I mean, people say things like you're the outcome of your action. That's the kind of terminology they use, right?
I'm just asking you whether there is a property there or not.
Meaning you want
to appeal to the name of the property isn't going to appeal to the name of what it is I'm asking you to account for isn't going to answer the question, right? So maybe you want to say there is a property that distinguishes the two, but I don't know what it is, right?
Well,
which will leave your account a non-account, right?
Well, I know. I think I do know perfectly well, if only from my first-person point of view, what the difference is between a free act and some kind of act or event that is non-voluntary. But I don't know how else to describe it than an action of my own free will, an action that's under my control, an action of which I'm the author, or some such things. Where
I don't see how appealing to phenomenology is going to help you, because I can grant, right, that there's going to be phenomenology in the one case and not in the other, right? But I don't see why the phenomenology is actually relevant, right? Just like the issue of reasons isn't relevant, right? Because there's a difference with respect to the issue of reasons. Uranium isn't acting on the basis of reasons, right, whereas the agent is, and the uranium it doesn't have any phenomenology by assumption, whereas the agent has phenomenology, right? But the phenomenology doesn't actually explain the action, and the reasons don't explain the action. I'm sorry, was that Yaniv piping up?
Yeah, just one good thought experiment would be if I could put an electrode in your brain that gave you the experience of making a choice, and yet we knew the cause was the electrode, would you feel comfortable saying that's your choice? Because you'd have the experience of making a choice, right? We know what's causing it. Would you feel comfortable saying, yeah, that's what I mean by me making a choice?
I think there was a question for Rik Peels and not Jack, right?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
I would no. So I'm a substance dualist. I would actually not be inclined to feel. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that was a choice. If there was a single electron who somehow caused my performing that particular action. No.
Performing and experiencing the choice. Somehow it was causally related to, whatever qualitative experience you have of making a choice. So I assume you would want to call that an illusion of choice, right? In that case.
Oh, if it had the same phenomenology of a choice.
Yes.
I would call that I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, so Jack, do you see the sort of contradiction there, Jack?
Yeah, well, I think it shows that the phenomenology isn't what accounts for the difference, right? Because the phenomenology can be the same, or it can be different in the two cases, right?
Oh, sure.
But appealing to the phenomenology doesn't actually account for what the relevant distinction is. So in other words, I'm granting that there's distinctions, right? In the one case, we're dealing with uranium. In the other case, we're not dealing with uranium. In one case, we're dealing with a yellow substance. In another case, we're not dealing with a yellow substance, right? In the one case, we're dealing with phenomenology. In the other case, we're not dealing with phenomenology. In the one case, we're dealing with reasons. In the other case, we're not dealing with reasons, right? And none of those things actually play the relevant role in distinguishing the two from the two, so that one is a choice and the other is a non-choice, right? In other words, that one is a random event and the other is not actually a random event. But I'm asking you for what the property is that actually makes it the case that it's not random, not the ones that are irrelevant.
Right. So just to be clear, I wasn't saying that the phenomenology is what makes the difference between the two, because, as I said, the phenomenology can be illusory. It's just that the phenomenology, as far as I know, is a reason to think that we do have free choice in particular cases.
I'm just trying to understand what you mean by a free choice is distinguished from a random event.
Well, again, I don't think I can say anything in addition to what I've said already. So I'm the author of my actions. It's under my control. It's up to me. The sort of thing, even like Fisher and Ravizza circumparabilists would say.
It just sounds to me like what you're calling authorship is just adding in phenomenology and reasons which you agree are not the relevant properties, right? And so you actually are only distinguishing between the two on the basis of your label, which is to appeal to a normative principle. You're not actually appealing to a property by which the two can be distinguished.
No, I am appealing to a property. It's just that I can't give any further descriptions of the property than I've been giving so far.
But I don't, look, let's say I don't understand what you mean by a choice, right?
Right.
So
that's quite
you say to me, well, there's this thing called choice, right? Now, it involves a certain phenomenology. You describe the phenomenology. And you say, and I say, yeah, I have that phenomenology, right? So what else is there to it? Because clearly the phenomenology is not enough, right? Well, it also involves these reasons, right? Say, oh, yeah, I have those, you know, but that's not enough either, right? Because so far I know what a random event is. You and I both seem to know what a random event is. I'm just trying to understand what you mean by a choice, right? And then you say, well, in every other respect, it's exactly like a random event, except that they differ. But they differ by virtue of the fact that they differ. I can't point to any property. I can't point to any property whatsoever, either in the third person or in the first person, in virtue of which they're distinct. But nonetheless, they're distinct types of events on the basis of this factor, which I can't give any flesh to whatsoever, either in the first person or the third person. Right. Why would I accept that you're not merely appealing to a normative principle there?
So what do you mean by, so you've used the expression normative principle a few times?
Via normativa. Via normativa. You know, this, it's a notion it's used in philosophy, it's used in Molière. Molière has this play where this doctor administers a sleep potion to a patient.
Oh, and
right?
that's right.
And the normative virtue, it's sometimes called. And so the person asks the doctor, what is it that's putting, when you give the patient that potion, what is it that's putting the patient to sleep? And he says, oh, it's the virtus normativa in the potion that puts the person to sleep, right? Now, virtus normativa means sleep-inducing power. So what puts the person to sleep is the sleep-inducing power of the potion, right? So this term, normative principle or normative virtue, is sort of like appealing to an explanation that's a non-explanation. It's just sort of appealing to a word, really, a label, rather than to a substantive explanatory property,
right,
as an explanation.
Right. Yeah. So I think I would be happy to say that if you don't agree, so if I've said what I've said, so it's up to me. I'm the author of it, and so on. And if you don't buy into that, giving a further description of free will, then there's nothing more I can say.
No, but I'm not saying that there is. I'm asking you why that isn't an appeal to a normative principle, right? Because you're granting that the phenomenology doesn't actually account for there being a difference, right? And you are granting that the reasons don't account for there being a difference, right? Those are just part of what there has to be for there to be, for me to be the author of my actions, right? So what I'm asking you is, what is it that you're appealing to apart from the phenomenology and the reasons, right? And it just sounds like you're saying nothing. You're saying, well, there's clearly no physical fact I can point to by virtue of which they differ. There's no phenomenological fact that relevantly accounts for the difference, right? And so, in fact, I don't know what's left over if there isn't something physical or phenomenological, right? And I don't see what difference it makes to appeal to that property, right? Like you're you're saying, yeah, there's a big difference between these two types of actions, two types of events, the uranium event and the human action, right? Why shouldn't I treat them the same way, right?
Okay, guys,
you know,
step in really quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to end this call in like between 5 and 10 minutes. I want to give Rik some time to give some final thought or response, and then I'll cut it up. And then Jack, via Jack, I will send the links on the morality issue, and I can also send you, if you want, Rik, the recording of this, so you can. And if at any time when you feel like it, and we can of course set up another conversation. That's totally up to you. Let me know. So yeah, take it away, Rik.
Okay. So to wrap up, I still feel like I'm being asked something that I can't give. I take it that people do have free will and that they act in taking into account their reasons, but that their reasons they're not a full explanation of their actions. Well, what else did I want to say about free will? So for something to be an action from free will is for that thing to be an action that was up to one, of which one was the author. And I don't think there's any other way to, or maybe there are further ways, but not significantly different ways to describe that kind of property. And I don't know what else I could do to further describe it. And I don't feel worried by that at all, actually.
Well, I think one of the issues is that you're not actually saying something informative, right? When you say that the agent's choice to do A explains why he did A, right? Because I take it that and that's sort of what the normative principle charge is about, is that you're not actually saying anything informative by appealing to this property as somehow explanatory. Because whether or not I appeal to this property, I get the same explanation, right, in World 1 and World 2. Right, in World 1 he chooses A, and World 2 he chooses B, right? And I can I'm actually only making the distinction by appealing ex post to whatever his choice was, right, to say that explains it, right? I say, well, he did A in this world because he chose A.
Right.
Whereas he did B in this world because he chose B. But how are you not seeing anything different than how is that in some way an explanation, right? Rather than just saying he did A and he did B. I just don't see what you're adding by saying he did A because he chose it, right? Right? Because here's my alternative explanation, right? It has no explanation, right? So he had reasons to do A in World 1. He also had equal reasons to do B, and he ended up doing A for no reason whatsoever, right? In World 2, he had reasons to do A, and he had equal reasons to do B. He ended up doing B, and he had no reasons whatsoever. My account is equally informative as yours, right? You're not able to point to any relevant property that actually explains why he did A in one world rather than B in the other world. You're just able to wait for the outcome and then attribute it to this property of choice as the explanation, but that doesn't actually explain anything because you'd appeal to the same thing, right, in World 2 and say, well, his choice explains it in this world, even though in every single respect the two worlds are identical up to that point. Right. I don't see how you're saying anything informative there.
Well, so I feel like I am saying something informative. It's just that I'm pinpointing this property. It's just that I can't give another description of this property, and you keep asking me for another characterization of this principle, and I simply can't give it.
Why not say the same thing in the case of the uranium, right? But the lump of uranium is exactly the same up to the moment of the event at time t1 as it is at time t2, right? Now, what if I say, if I said to you, well, the uranium just chose to do A,
Right.
right? Would you consider that a satisfactory explanation?
No, I wouldn't.
Why?
And that is because we have no reason to think that bits of uranium make choices, whereas
Well,
we do.
if you think that there's reason to think that there's this property of choice, right, over and above the phenomenology, and over and above the issue of reasons themselves being present in the two cases, that's what I'm asking you to disclose, what that reason is.
But why do you think I was saying that there's reason over and above the phenomenology? So what I'm suggesting is that the phenomenology gives us reason to think that we do have a choice. I'm not saying that if the phenomenology is there, then we necessarily have a choice.
I have the same phenomenology as you, presumably, right?
I suppose so.
And I don't see anything in my phenomenology, right, that somehow is coming into conflict with my explanation for what's going on in the two cases, right? So what I'm asking you is, what is it?
Randomness, right?
Well, I'm just saying that there isn't an explanation. I'm just saying that if it's the case that there is irreducible random eventuation, which underlies my choices when I have a choice between A and B, right? I'm just saying that there's nothing in my phenomenology that contradicts that the fact that it's random explains it.
Right.
So how about if we use a very simple case in point? For example, instead of saying agent A for reason B, let's take everyday life. Let's say I'm going to brush my teeth. Somebody asks me, hey, why are you brushing your teeth? Well, because it's proven that it's good, beneficial for the health of my of my teeth. And if you ask me, why didn't you do it yesterday? Well, I got drunk and I didn't care. I mean, I'm giving an explanation of the event, right? So how is that not informative?
But the question is, did you have equal reasons in both cases?
Well, the reason...
If your reasons really explain the action, right, it seems to me, then you're going to have more...
So you're saying that the reasons are epiphenomenal?
No, I'm not saying they're epiphenomenal. I'm saying that if they're actually going to explain your action, they have to actually cause your behavior. But that's exactly what Rik is denying, right? He's saying your reasons to do A don't actually cause you to do A because your reasons to do B are just as powerful as your reasons to do A. So, in fact, if your reasons to do A and your reasons to do A over B, they don't actually explain your action. Right? Because if they explained it, they would cause it. But they can't cause it, right, if they're equally powerful, right? Because then they would have equal strength, right? So something else has to explain it. Now, that could be the intervention of a random factor, or it could be some other cause, right? That's not part of your initial causal inventory, Maybe there's some, physical facts about my body, that ultimately ended up explaining why I did one rather than the other, or something like that, right? Some unconscious cause, maybe, or something, right? So I'm saying, if you want your reasons to explain your behavior, your reasons have to actually cause you to do what you do. If they don't cause you to do what you do, then your reasons don't actually explain your behavior.
I would say that the agent causes the action, the event to occur, but the reasons are the explanation, but they're not determining it. Like there could be no other way. So I could brush my teeth.
I don't see why. I don't see how you're saying anything informative when you say it explains it, right? When you'd appeal to the same explanation in the second world, right? You'd appeal to the same reasons where you didn't end up brushing your teeth and say my reasons explained why I did it.
I guess I would say the reason still stay in place. It's beneficial for my dental, for my teeth, but I didn't do it because I didn't care at that point because of my state of mind at that point. But I can still say I, the agent, did brush my teeth for this reason. So if I explain that to somebody, I think it's still informative because I'm explaining what happened and why it happened. So I'm saying the agent is the cause, the reasons are the explanation.
I don't know what you mean by explanation if it doesn't actually tell us anything that would show why you did what you did causally.
It does, because if the person is asking me why I'm brushing my teeth, I'm giving him a reason why.
Yeah, but the point is you can have multiple reasons to do things, right? But presumably there's one that really explains why you did it, right? Let's say I have a choice between A and B, and I have a lot of reasons to do A and very few reasons to do B, and the reasons to do B are not very good and not very strong, right? But I have reason 1 to do A, and it's a strong reason. I have reason 2 to do A, and it's a strong reason. I have reason 3 to do A, and it's a strong reason. But maybe it's the case that reasons 2 and 3 don't explain why I do A, right? Maybe it's really only reason 1 that explains why I do A. So if I do A and ask me why, I say it was because of reason 1. When I say that I did A for reason 1, and reason 1 explains why I do A, aren't I saying that it's because, aren't I saying that reason 1 is the one that caused me to do A rather than 2 and 3? Otherwise, how else am I differentiating which one is the genuine explanatory reason?
Okay, Justin typed, I don't even know how to pronounce it,